Welcome to live coverage of this BBC News special on a day for Andy Burnham. Becomes a brand new Prime Minister, so Keir Stammer will resign and we'll go see for Kin later on today. As I say, it's going to happen over the next couple of hours. So we believe at 11:15 AM we will bring you live. So Keir Stammer will come outside and return and do his final farewell speech at 11:15. Then he'll leave here, he'll go up to Burnham Post in front of a packed crowd fair, and he will resign and say final farewell to our king. And then Mr. Andy Burnham will be invited to go speak. They'll have a phone call on Burnham Charles. He'll be invited. He'll go off to Buckingham Palace. We'll bring a picture of that later on. And he will be asked to form a government. And Andy Burnham will leave Buckingham Palace. He'll come in a fancy car. He'll come all the way down from Buckingham Palace right here to London. And we believe after midday we will hear from our brand new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. And then this afternoon we'll still have coverage this afternoon, and he will be asked to appoint his cabinet. We were discussing that all weekend. Will he keep Yvette Cooper, Virgil Reeves, David Lammy? We don't know yet. We have got, joining me throughout the day, we've got political editor Chris Mason, Nick Erdley, we've got Henry Sessman and Nina Smith here, both at Buckingham Palace for us, but I've got Chris and Nick alongside me throughout the morning. We are going to look back at Keir's life. Prime Minister. Well, we will take you back to when he won for the 2024 election. We'll never won a landslide victory. We'll show you. We'll also more about Andy when he won for Makerfield election, stuff like that. All that to come this morning.
Change at the top. So let's just run through what you need to know about what's expected to happen today. Just after 11 o'clock, Keir is expected to emerge from this famous front door, up a little bit, and from here it's getting busy as well. Very, very busy, because media from all around the UK, around the world, have descended on number 10 to capture the moment when Andy Burnham becomes our next Prime Minister. In just a few hours' time, the man who was Mayor of Greater Manchester until last month is expected to stand here and spell out his vision. He will promise to make politics more stable as he becomes the UK's 59th Prime Minister and the 7th that we've had in just a decade. And a reminder of just how fast-moving, how brutal politics can be. Just 2 years after leading Labour to a landslide victory in the general election, the removal vans have been here over the weekend at the back of this building, taking away Sir Keir Starmer's possessions after his own MPs concluded it was time for a change at the top. So let's just run through what you need to know about what's expected to happen today. Just after 11 o'clock, Sir Keir is expected to emerge from this famous front door and leave Downing Street as Prime Minister for the last time. He will say a few words, we expect, and then after that he'll make his way up the Mall to Buckingham Palace to see King Charles, where he will officially offer his resignation as PM. Then the King will call for Andy Burnham and he will ask Mr Burnham, as the new leader of the Labour Party, to form a government. And once Mr Burnham has accepted that invitation, Andy Burnham officially becomes Prime Minister. And then he will head back down the Mall to number 10 and he will give a speech here addressing the nation. That will be just after midday, we think, and you'll be able to see it all here live on BBC One. You can probably hear all the voices, lots of different languages and accents, such as the international interest in this moment. You can probably also hear the bins being collected. We've had street cleaners here, lots of activity for this big moment in UK political history. Here on Breakfast this morning, we're explaining how this handover of powers is going to work, but we're also asking what kind of Prime Minister Andy Burnham intends to be. How will he affect all of our lives? Who's he going to put in those key cabinet jobs, running our economy and our welfare system, our hospitals, our schools, our military, our borders, so much more as well. It's going to be a busy morning, busy day, so let's just begin with this summary from our political correspondent, Joe Pike.
His route to the peak of power is almost complete. Andy Burnham spent some of his final hours outside Downing Street jogging, while inside the secure zone, final preparations were being made for his arrival. Later, he will promise to give Britain more breathing space, likely further cost of living support, say he's acutely conscious of the high turnover of prime ministers, and argue we're at a moment of reflection and resolution.
Coming out with that clearer vision, a bolder vision, being clear that we are on the side of ordinary working people, taking on the vested and private interests where we need to do so, and redistributing power into every community. That is a vision I think people will really get behind.
As Andy Burnham's arrival approaches, opposition parties are sharpening their critiques. In a letter to the new Prime Minister, Kemi Badenoch has said, "I was disappointed by your recent comment that there was room for movement on tax, and that you might ask people for a little more in tax. I urge you to rule out any new tax rises now." Reform UK are demanding a general election, while the Lib Dems have offered to work with Labour to reform social care. Andy Burnham's journey to this moment and this street has been surprisingly smooth in recent weeks, but later today that could change. He doesn't just need to decide who to appoint to government, but who to overlook and who to sack. Then there are choices over policy, and not all of them come cheap. Today, in his speech on this street, Andy Burnham will promise to give the public breathing room, but he is unlikely to get any himself. Joe Pike, BBC News, Downing Street.
Cameras arriving all the time here in Downing Street. We each have a fixed position, a mark on the ground where we have to stand for the day ahead of that announcement. I'm on my spot, Henry's on his spot, and somewhere there we think Andy Burnham will speak to the nation on his spot and tell us what he's going to do with this new job and this new power he's got.
That's right, John, and it's a job that he's wanted for decades. It's a job that he's been near inevitably on course for about a month. But there are still big unanswered questions about what exactly he wants to do. I think in that speech later today, we won't necessarily get a list of policies, though we may get a few. But I think we will get a sense of the kinds of things Andy Burnham wants to focus on, and I think top of that list is going to be the cost of living. He will talk about, as you heard from Joe there, trying to give people breathing space. Now, what might that mean in policy terms? I think we will find out over the course of this week, because Andy Burnham certainly wants to hit the ground running. I think we might get action on energy bills. We might get something to reduce or cap bus fares across England. We may even get a hint, at least, of something coming down the track on increasing the thresholds at which people start to pay income tax, the personal allowance rate. So that might be what we get through the course of the week. But I think what you'll also get from Andy Burnham is an acknowledgement that you and me, John, have been standing here for moments like this quite a lot in the past few years. He'll talk about a plan for a decade in power, but he knows, as we all do, that Sir Keir Stammer thought he was going to get a decade, that other people thought that they were going to get much longer than they got. So he needs to find a way to kind of draw a line under that political turbulence. Whether it will work out that way, we'll find out.
And he needs to find a chancellor to live next door who will help him deliver the kind of agenda that he wants to set.
That's absolutely right. We will see. There will then be some private conversation between the two of them. Again, you would imagine that might be around Andy Burnham's priorities, his intent as Prime Minister, perhaps the formation.
The next few hours or so, and Chris is with me now.
Will make a statement outside number 10. That is around 11:15 today. He'll then travel to Buckingham Palace for his final audience with the King, when he'll formally hand in his resignation. After that, Andy Burnham will travel to the palace, where the King will invite him to form a new government. And Mr. Burnham will then head to ensure that when he goes to the polls in 2029, people...
Johan, I love Haverfordwest with all my heart, so I'm going to come to you. Not that I don't like Hull or Swanley, but it's such a beautiful...
No, absolutely not. The thing is, again, 10 years. It's a joke, really, isn't it, politics in this country. Andy Burnham, yeah, Mayor of Manchester. From Liverpool, I didn't understand what...
As Prime Minister in the next couple of hours. Thank you for joining us here on BBC Breakfast this morning. It's been a busy, frantic few hours, hasn't it? I'm about to go to the palace and hand in my resignation, and then Clive Myrie will be invited to form a new trial of BBC One. A new administration, there's no question about that. You talked about the transfer of power, and that's a really important thing to focus on, I think, in this moment, because I have reported from places where you get a transfer of power. It's not very peaceful. This has happened, what, 5 times over the last 4 years, 7 times in the last decade, roughly. And as Prime Minister in the next couple of hours. Thank you for joining us here on BBC Breakfast this morning. It's been a busy, frantic few hours.
I just worry that people only listen to the headlines and they don't bother to do any sort of level of fact-checking and to see whether some of these things are even possible. I mean, let's face it, we don't have a lot of money, so somehow we have to manage it better. I think that's...
Really learn from. So at the moment, we're taking away the future. We have been doing it for 20, 30 years. Back in, I've got 2 teenage boys. I'm concerned about...
Does he need to hold an election and so on and so forth, but we should be proud of that in this country at the moment, particularly given the events going on in so many other parts of the world. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
And a reminder when you see all these cameras and hear all these languages from all over the world of how much global interest there is in the UK in a moment like this.
Absolutely huge. We are talking about, we're going to be talking to Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, about the international ramifications of this change of leadership. What could Andy Burnham be doing in terms of foreign policy, the relationship, of course, with America, and crucially with Europe as well, the continuing situation in Ukraine and so on. We'll be getting into that. But yes, here, surrounded by journalists all the way down to the gates there, hitting the main road. This is a massive story, not just for the people of the United Kingdom, huge story globally as well.
I feel like I've reserved our BBC lounger by the pool, and you now get it.
Get your swimmers on.
Look after the cat, okay? Larry the cat has been here all morning.
I don't want to mess with that cat.
Have a good shift.
Thank you so much. Thank you. John Kay there. Hello to you from Downing Street here on a day that the UK gets its 5th Prime Minister in 4 years. In about 2.5 hours from now, Andy Burnham will arrive at this door behind me to take office, replacing Sir Keir Stammer, who became Prime Minister after the general election just 2 years ago. Seems like a lifetime ago now, but just 2 years ago. And Mr. Burnham, the former Mayor of Greater Manchester, of course, was elected an MP just last month and became leader of the Labour Party just last Friday. Well, we'll bring you all the events this morning live here on BBC One, iPlayer and the News Channel, and we'll be looking at the enormous challenges Mr. Burnham will be facing. So, let's take a look at what we can expect over the next few hours or so. Well, the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, will make a statement outside number 10. That is around 11:15 today. He'll then travel to Buckingham Palace for his final audience with the King, when he'll formally hand in his resignation. After that, Andy Burnham will travel to the palace, where the King will invite him to form a new government. And Mr. Burnham will then head to Downing Street, where he'll address the nation at around 12:45. Then,
over the next few hours, we can expect to see cabinet appointments. Who will be traversing the tarmac here outside number 10? Who will be in? Who will be out? Who will be retained from Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet himself? What Andy Burnham's government will look like could give an indication as to the kind of policies that he will be looking to institute over the next 2 to 3 years over the run of this parliament. Remember, this is a man who has given few indications, some in the newspapers this morning, about the possibility of taxes going up, for instance, on some sectors. In some sectors, he's talked about the possibility of continuing, certainly, the relationship that...
As you say, the absence of either a general election or indeed an internal contest means there hasn't been that public battle of ideas where candidates, even
was elected an MP just last month and became leader of the Labour Party just last Friday.
And then very quickly after that, possibly within a minute or so, Andy Burnham will make his way here. He will go in the north gate of Buckingham Palace and meet King Charles, and King Charles will ask him to...
It's got to be appealing to the whole nation in order to bring everybody in.
yes, and so he very pointedly the other day, when he accepted the Labour Party leadership, talking about governing for the north, south, the east and the west, and for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I mean, you might say, and critics have said, well, of course, because that's what every Prime Minister would seek to do. Pointedly as well, he went to Gravesend in Kent for his first visit as Labour leader to emphasise that communities like that are just as important to him as those in the northwest of England. So how does he, if you like, build up his image, his brand, awareness of him beyond the northwest of England? Because, you know, in the last couple of weeks, we've had the World Cup, we've had heat waves, we've had no general election, no internal contest within the Labour Party. And so actually a big part of what Andy Burnham's got to do, standing here in the street in a couple of hours, by the way, we don't think with a lectern, we think he might dispense with the idea of a lectern. A big part of it is introducing himself to the country and beginning that process of trying to win an argument in the country. That process begins for him in a couple of hours.
Indeed. All right, Chris, much more from you in the next few hours or so. We're going to be talking about policy, of course. We're going to be talking about his ideas for reforming social security and the safety net. We're going to be talking about taxes. We're going to be talking about foreign policy. All that is to come. But, of course, he has to be formally invited by the King to become the next Prime Minister and to form a new government. And my colleague Fiona is at Buckingham Palace for us now. Fiona.
Yes, so in the next hour and a half, Keir Starmer will make his way for the last time from Downing Street to come here to offer his formal resignation to the King. This is something he has to do in person. And then very quickly after that, possibly within a minute or so, Andy Burnham will make his way here. He will go in the north gate of Buckingham Palace and meet King Charles, and King Charles will ask him to form a government. It's a constitutional process. This is the way it works in the United Kingdom. Meticulous preparations have been underway here this morning, and of course this is a familiar process for the King. I mean, this is the fourth Prime Minister for him in the 4 years of his reign. And Andy Burnham is also familiar to him. He's met him a number of times before. Well, as I say, meticulous preparations. We've been seeing gardeners making sure all the geraniums are looking perfect. Buckingham Palace gleaming in the sunshine. Daniela Ralph is with me, as you've been here all morning, Daniela. You've seen what's going on, and I say it's a familiar process for Buckingham Palace. Andy Burnham will be the 59th Prime Minister, but nonetheless, it has to run like clockwork.
Yes, really, this is a show of constitutional monarchy. So there is a little bit of drama in all of this here today in terms of Buckingham Palace. But I suppose we know who all the players are. We know how this is going to end. But it's an important reminder of the UK's constitutional monarchy and the role of the King in it. So we know that the King has spent the weekend at his Highgrove estate in Gloucestershire. He will arrive soon here to Buckingham Palace, ready to welcome an outgoing Prime Minister and a new Prime Minister. It will be a very careful, choreographed, smooth transition of power
that we will see here later this morning. As you say, everything is being prepared. Here's some of the crowds gathering outside the palace now as well. Many of them perhaps here to see changing of the guard, and things have changed rather in terms of the timing this morning. But yeah, even the gravel inside the quadrangle where the outgoing and incoming prime ministers will go has been raked to perfection to make sure everything is incredibly well choreographed and carefully done today.
And I say this is not the first time the King has done this, but in order to strike the mood, I mean, you have a Prime Minister coming in, Keir Starmer, clearly a very sombre moment for him, one he could not have thought would be coming, just 2 years after he won that landslide majority. And then Andy Burnham coming in, no doubt with some trepidation, but full of excitement and optimism looking to the future.
Yeah, there are some real contrasts, I think, here today. Firstly, that this transition of power is quiet, it is careful, it's choreographed against the noise and the turbulence of day-to-day politics that we've seen in recent months. And then the contrast in terms of the personal experiences for the two men involved here today. As you say, for Sir Keir Starmer, it must be a day tinged with sadness, with regret, perhaps a little bit of relief as well for his family maybe. And then for Andy Burnham, he will be arriving here full of optimism and hope, and as you say, trepidation, but of very different personal experiences that both men will have here today. And if you read any memoir of any former British Prime Minister, this day here, this moment here at Buckingham Palace is an extremely memorable one for them.
And look, a bit of ceremony happening now here as we see. Now tell us what we're seeing there, Danielle.
Yeah, some of the military movements up and down here, ready for changing of the guard later, that we are seeing here today outside Buckingham Palace. It would be around this moment here that we would normally see changing of the guard, but the timings have all been shifted to accommodate some of the ceremony, I suppose, some of the constitutional moments that are required today.
So what exactly will happen? So Keir Starmer will drive in his car, in a convoy, I assume, into the north gate of the palace, and then what?
Yeah, so we will see the whole journey of Sir Keir Starmer, because we will know that after his speech in Downing Street, we will be able to follow him up the Mall into Buckingham Palace here, a journey of around a mile. It will take just a couple of minutes with a police escort. They will go into the centre gates in a vehicle. They will his vehicle will drive into the quadrangle, into a side entrance of Buckingham Palace. There he will be met by senior members of the royal household. That will be the King's private secretary and his equerry, and taken inside to an ante-room for a couple of moments with his wife, Lady Victoria. And then Sir Keir Starmer will go in to see the King. The equerry will introduce Sir Keir Starmer to the King. Your Majesty, the Prime Minister, perhaps the very last time we hear Sir Keir Starmer referred to as Prime Minister. There will then be, usually around 20 minutes or so, a meeting between the King and Prime Minister, where Sir Keir Starmer will offer his resignation, the King will accept it, and there will then be a conversation between the two of them. You would imagine that would be quite reflective, perhaps, on the shared experiences that they have had with one another. Sir Keir Starmer then leaves, no longer Prime Minister.
And he doesn't come out the front.
No, he usually goes out a side entrance, so there is no fanfare. He quietly leaves Buckingham Palace.
And at the moment, we've no idea where he's going from.
We don't. No, we don't know where he will go. So, and at that moment, attention immediately switches to the arrival of Andy Burnham. Just a few minutes, we think, between those two moments, Sir Keir leaving, Andy Burnham arriving. And it will be the same process going into the quadrangle, driven in to Buckingham Palace with his family, Andy Burnham. They will then go inside, supported by royal household staff. Andy Burnham then goes in to meet the King. The King will ask him if he can form a government. Andy Burnham will say yes. There will then be some private conversation between the two of them. Again, you would imagine that might be around Andy Burnham's priorities, his intent as Prime Minister, perhaps the formation of his cabinet. And then Andy Burnham leaves here for Downing Street and his first speech there as Prime Minister.
And of course, the King and Andy Burnham will then work reasonably closely together in terms of big state occasions, foreign trips, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Our understanding is that they don't particularly know each other very well, although they have met a number of times. The King has made 3 visits to Manchester, official visits, during his time as King, but he would also have met Andy Burnham when he was a Secretary of State in previous government. So there is a familiarity, but they don't particularly know each other very well. They will get to know each other fast. There will be that weekly private audience that the King has with the Prime Minister on a Wednesday. That will start immediately. There is usually a moment later on in the summer. The King will shortly go on holiday up to Scotland, to Balmoral. The Prime Minister and his family are generally invited up to Balmoral towards the end of August, beginning of September, so we can expect Andy Burnham to do that. That will be
a very easy, informal moment for him to get to know the King and the royal family perhaps a little better. And then, as you say, there are these state occasions, big official moments, Remembrance Sunday, international travel, incoming state visits, state banquets, where the two men will get to know each other better.
And how important is it that they get on? I mean, there have been instances, famously through history, where prime ministers and
efficiently, both in terms of cost and time.
There's been a lot of talk about the
Yeah. What's going to look at for Chancellor role for Andy-Burnham will appoint as Chancellor, taxes, income, helping businesses, households, bills, stuff like that. But we just want to hit more from Burnham Islam.
Election, for instance, that would mean that there would be some kind of manifesto where the potential Prime Minister could lay out his or her stall. There was no leadership contest either that took place for leadership of the Labour Party. Andy Burnham, therefore, didn't have that opportunity to set out his stall in terms of policy priorities and so on. And I've mentioned social care, I've mentioned taxes, the economy, cost of living crisis, foreign policy and so on. Are we any clearer on which direction this new incoming Prime Minister could be heading?
He's painted in pretty broad brushstrokes, to be honest. He's talked about his black box, by the way, as far as this is concerned, both in terms of policy and in particular personnel. It's been a very, very tight group of people in the last couple of weeks who've been in the most intense discussions, both about the personnel around his cabinet table and indeed the conversations they've been having with government departments. They're known as access talks. In conventional times, it's what a opposition party does in the countdown to a general election so that they are sufficiently prepared for government if they are to win. Andy Burnham's been doing it in the last few weeks with just two senior aides. So James Purnell, who's going to be his chief of staff, is already his chief of staff, and Louise Haigh, Labour MP, former cabinet minister, who's been central to his campaigning in recent months. So it has been very tight. As you say, the absence of either a general election or indeed an internal contest means there hasn't been that public battle of ideas where candidates, even in an internal contest, are forced to put some ideas out there and see them stress tested by their own side and then have to move a little bit because their rival has moved a little bit, and the usual competitive nature of a race in politics. So it has been pretty broad brush. As you touch on, some of the ideas that he is keen on, social care in England, talks very movingly actually in an interview with Patrick Maguire in the Times this morning about his dad, Roy, a Labour man for his entire life, who's living with Alzheimer's and doesn't know that his son's about to become Prime Minister and is already Labour leader. So he talks very passionately about social care and has done for many years, but what about the specifics? And then one intriguing detail, Clive, which is very much in Faisal's wheelhouse, again in this Times interview this morning, Andy Burnham talking about a recurring theme that came up, he says, on the doorsteps in the Makerfield constituency during the by-election, about the point at which people start paying income tax. It's known as the personal allowance, and that level has been frozen for the last handful of years. And Andy Burnham articulating a sense of frustration that he picked up on the doorsteps around that. And he's talked repeatedly, Clive, Andy Burnham, about the Makerfield test, about the decisions he'll make in there being driven by the people he represents in that corner of the northwest of England. So fascinating that he would float a potential and quite specific tax change the morning that he becomes Prime Minister.
Yeah, let's get on to that, Faisal, because Chris talks about frustration there. Prime Ministers, it seems, often have frustrations with their chancellors, the men or women who hold the purse strings at the Treasury. And there's a suggestion that perhaps there's going to be a little bit more oversight from number 10 over number 11, where the Chancellor resides. And the idea that perhaps whoever comes in as Chancellor, and the suggestion is that it might be the current Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, could be a Chino, a Chancellor in name only. What do you hear?
Yes, I mean, so if it is Shabana Mahmood, and that seems to be the direction that the talk is going, we don't have a sort of large hinterland of speeches to judge her economic views. She was a shadow junior Treasury Minister back in the day, so I'm sure they are well developed if it is her. But, we don't have the sort of run-up of 2 years of speeches that Rachel Reeves gave when she was Shadow Chancellor, if there is to be that change. And so as important, and it's rare to say this, as the appointment to Chancellor will be, I will also be looking for other economic appointments, potentially at number 10. If the sorts of names we've been hearing about, and again, you hear that they're up or they're down, but if it's like a Jim O'Neill, who's a very senior city economist, very well respected, Andy Haldane, a former chief economist at the Bank of England, Richard Hughes, a former chief of the Office of Budget Responsibility. If those guys are anyway around number 10, that is a formidable economic muscle. And I think I'm right, Chris, on the door, on that golden, it says First Lord of the Treasury. It's First Lord of the Treasury. And so when you look back now to some evidence that we do have of what Andy Burnham as Prime Minister might want to do, it's from his book that he co-wrote with Merseyside Mayor Steve Rotherham. There is quite a detailed set of plans and some scepticism as to the role of the Treasury in holding back investment across the United Kingdom, not just in the north of England. A very specific case when he was Chief Secretary 10 years ago, when he asked about the very successful Elizabeth Line, Crossrail as it was called. He said, well, I want an equivalent project for the north of England. And it didn't pass the Treasury formula. The computer said no, there is no equivalent project. He recounts that story, and that I think is probably one of the foundational stories of his journey here. And so I look at this. Yes, I'm looking at who's Chancellor, but I'm also looking at the other economic team. And there is that question. The other thing I would say, just in terms of what Chris said about the lack of a battle on the way here. So what the markets want to see is they want to see, yes, a number 10 and a number 11 that can make the budget sums add up. And there's questions about that. A lot of the policies we've been hearing from Andy Burnham, even in their vague form, have been about spending more money. And how is that going to add up? Even this issue about the taxation and the thresholds.
That will be billions lost.
That will be 4 billion minimum if you start raising them from 2027. Depending on the rate of inflation, 6 or 7 billion. Some of the ideas here, which are circulating actually from the unions, I'm a tiny bit sceptical about how much this came up from the masses. By definition, these are known as stealth taxes. Maybe they are starting to hit home now, and maybe that's what he's noticed. But this is an expensive tax move that affects everybody, and one wonders about that. And I have heard that there are concrete plans emerging from unions about this being their target. And that's such an irony, because this was the same plan that came from the Conservative coalition government to raise thresholds, and then they froze them for ages because which had a huge effect because of high inflation. So in terms of the markets, they want them to add up. But I think the other thing we've seen in the past few years of instability in this street is they want to know their chancellor can pass a budget. And so I think what you've seen with this, as you call it, peaceful transition of power, is it seems like, Chris will know more than me, that the loyalties of this Labour majority have just been transferred over to Andy Burnham, so he will be able to potentially make those tough decisions to make those numbers add up, but we haven't heard how yet.
We haven't heard how yet. Okay, Faisal, Chris, more with you a little bit later. Andy Burnham has been talking about trying to create breathing space for ordinary people on the street. And as Chris was indicating there, he was talking about the Makerfield test, this idea that
So like I said when we're going to look back on Sir Keir Stammer as Prime Minister, we will start all the way back in July 2024 when Labour won a landslide at the general election. Let's take you back to Labour winning the election. So we're gonna take you back again to when Labour won that election just 2 years ago, and that's when Sir Keir Stammer took them back to power for 5th ever Labour leader to win an election, and that was the first in a long time we saw a Labour government form. Let's take a listen. This is when Labour won the general election.
Sir Keir Stammer, who will become Britain's 58th Prime Minister. He's speaking in central London. He's the only 5th Labour Prime Minister ever to win a general election. A man who often presents a serious demeanour in public, but look at that grin from ear to ear. The supporters behind him cheer. The Union flag and the saltire, look, they are being flown behind him as Labour has racked up seats in Scotland. Let's listen in to the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. And it feels good, I have to be honest. 4.5 years of work changing the party. This is what it is for. A changed Labour Party, ready to serve our country, ready to restore Britain to the service of working people. And across our country, people will be waking up to the news, relieved that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward again, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity after 14 years to get its future back. And I want to thank each and every one of you here for campaigning so hard for change. And not just in this campaign either. Also for these 4.5 years changing our party. The Labour movement is always everything's achieved, past and future, down to the efforts of its people. So thank you truly. You have changed our country. But a mandate like this comes with a great responsibility. Our task is nothing less than renewing the ideas that hold this country together. National renewal. Whoever you are, wherever you started in life, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, this country should give you a fair chance to get on. It should always respect your contribution, and we have to restore that. And alongside that, we have to return politics to public service. Show that politics can be a force for good. Make no mistake, that is the great test of politics in this era. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our age. It is why we've campaigned so hard on demonstrating we are fit for public service. Service is the precondition for hope. Respect, the bond that can unite a country. Together, the values of this Change Labour Party are the guiding principle for a new government. Country first, party second. That is the responsibility of this mandate. You know, 14 years ago, we were told that we're all in it together. I say to the British people today, imagine what we can do if that were actually true. So, by all means, enjoy this moment. Nobody can say you haven't waited patiently. Enjoy the feeling of waking up on a morning like this, with the emotion that you do see the country through the same eyes. Hold on to it, because it is what unity is made from. But use it to show to the rest of the country, as we must, that this party has changed, that we will serve them faithfully, govern for every single person in this country. But also, don't forget how we got here. This morning,
So that's how Labour, that's when Labour won. And that's how Sir Keir Starmer's reign as Prime Minister began 2 years ago when he won that election and gave Labour power and gave people, like he said, you campaigned for it, you fitted for it, and now the change has happened. That was 2 years ago, but now at 11:15 we're going to hear from Sir Keir Starmer final message speech outside number 10.
That door, the difficult decisions begin, and that is where the unpopularity, he will hope.
I'm going to speak to Chris in just a second. I just want to get more live picks from number 10 right now.
Starts to creep in.
And briefly, it's not just about trying to communicate your vision to the public. It's about the people in your party as well. And we know that when it comes to Sir Keir Starmer and some welfare cuts, for instance, that was very difficult.
Really difficult. And so many of the policy issues that cause Keir Starmer grief with his own side, Andy Burnham's going to inherit. What is he going to do about the welfare bill, which has been climbing significantly? Plenty of Labour MPs quite squeamish as we see the lectern arriving
so he's
behind
not
us.
going to be doing it with us. Okay,
Keir
so this
Starmer
is Sir
will
Keir
use the
Starmer.
lectern.
Right, okay.
We think it will only have one outing today, this lectern. This is the hardest working lectern in the Western world. Actually, it's not, because there's been different lecterns. Liz Truss had a kind of swirly-based lectern when she was in the job. This is a straight-based lectern. Has a very precise spot to be put
I was going to say, and we're also not going to be hearing Ode to Joy or the possibility of any other extraneous noises, perhaps the police helicopters above, but no music. That's been banned by the authorities.
It has. So in the last couple of occasions here, not least the day that Keir Starmer announced that he would be leaving, he was, to a greater or lesser extent, drowned out by noises off from the bottom of Whitehall. That has been banned this time, so we will hear both the outgoing Prime Minister and the incoming Prime Minister without a musical fanfare or otherwise.
All right, Chris, more from you in a few minutes. So the lectern is here. We're expecting the Prime Minister to come out possibly in about half an hour or so to give his farewell address before heading over to Buckingham Palace to formally resign as Prime Minister. We're going to see now how other parts of the country are reacting to another new Prime Minister. In a moment, we'll be in Cardiff and Belfast, but first we're going to go to Edinburgh and Katie Hunter, who's there for us now. What's the view from there, Katie?
Morning from Holyrood, Clive. Well, Scotland's First Minister John Swinney has said that he wishes Andy Burnham well. He said that the two men will work together to improve the lives of the people of Scotland. And he said that If Andy Burnham is serious about strengthening the powers of the Scottish Parliament to grow the economy, then Mr Burnham will find a willing partner with John Swinney. But the First Minister has also made the point that it isn't for the, as he puts it, latest incumbent of number 10 to decide the future of Scotland. It is for the people of Scotland to decide that. In other words, I think there will be calls for Andy Burnham to transfer powers from Westminster to Holyrood so that Holyrood can have the power to hold a second referendum. Don't forget, a majority of MSPs here support independence. In the recent Scottish election, Scottish Labour suffered their worst result in the history of devolution. So there's a lot of talk here among Scottish Labour figures of energy, of optimism. They hope Andy Burnham's appointment will be a turning point. But of course, his opponents are saying that he will be judged on his actions, not on his words.
Katie, has there been much of a relationship between Andy Burnham and the Scottish Labour Party?
Well, John Swinney will be hoping to meet Andy Burnham in the coming days. Of course, Andy Burnham knows some figures from Scottish Labour from his time back in the Blair and Brown government in that era. And it will be interesting to see later this afternoon who he appoints as the new Scottish Secretary. Douglas Alexander in that role at the moment. Andy Burnham and Douglas Alexander do go back to the Brown and Blair days. Or could there be a newer face for that position? Perhaps Blair McDougall or Michael Shanks. But as yet, Andy Burnham, Team Burnham, have been keeping their cards pretty close to their chest. So we should get more answers on that front later this afternoon.
All right, Katie, thank you. Katie Hunter there at Holyrood. We're going to go to Howell Griffiths, who's at the Senedd in Cardiff. Howell, I was with you on that night that Labour was obliterated in the regional elections. That was possibly the moment many people would point to as the final nail in the coffin for Sir Keir Stammer that's led to events today.
Absolutely, it's hard to understate the impact of that Senedd election after Labour ruled Wales for 27 years. To lose that power and to lose it in an incredible shift towards Plaid Cymru as the government, Reform as the second place party, Labour way behind. Many people here, in fact, I think I've stood right here interviewing a former Labour Senedd member, putting the blame squarely on Sir Keir Starmer, as Chris reflected there. People on the doorstep, according to Labour MSs at least, blaming Sir Keir, saying they didn't want to vote for Labour in Wales because of the UK party. Now, how does Andy Burnham rebuild bridges with Labour supporters here? It will be a long process, and he has to do, well, arguably two things. Talk to Labour in Wales, but also speak to the party of government, now Plaid Cymru. In theory, both camps support greater devolution. We've heard that message a lot from Andy Burnham. In practice, it might be a difficult relationship because they want different things. Andy Burnham talking about giving regions in Wales more power. The Welsh Government pointing out actually local government is under their control, as is housing, as is social care. So many of the subjects we've heard so far from Andy Burnham. So how power and money flows in that new relationship between Wales and Westminster will be interesting to track.
Yeah, that will be fascinating, Howell. But is there a sense from the local Labour Party that perhaps this change of leadership might see their fortunes turn in a better direction?
Well, arguably, the only way is up for Welsh Labour now, having lost so many of their members. The previous First Minister, Eluned Morgan, losing her seat. So a new leader coming into place, Ken Skates, leading only a small group within the Senedd. We know that he is a supporter of Andy Burnham. We believe that he was out there actually campaigning in Makerfield for Andy Burnham. So there's a relationship there. And Ken Skates, who leads leads Labour in Wales now, is from North Wales and would maybe have more in common with a Prime Minister who's from the northwest of England. So there's a relationship there. that may help Labour in future Senedd elections, and arguably maybe even more in future general elections. It depends on the kind of Welsh Labour we're talking about. Is it one that wants to appeal to Plaid Cymru voters here, talking about greater devolution, things like justice, like rail, the things that Plaid Cymru wants? Or is it maybe more of a centralist one that, while it talks about devolution, wants to keep a grip of those core issues for the UK government? That's maybe where the tension is within Labour. That's something that Andy Burnham will need to consider when he speaks to Ken Skates in the future.
All right, Howell Griffith at the Senedd there in Cardiff. We're going to cross over to Sarah Gervin, who's at Stormont, I see, for us today. Sarah, just give us a sense of how this new leadership might go down where you are.
Yeah, well, I think the issue is, and we've been hearing this from Scotland and Wales as well, is that Andy Burnham is a bit of an unknown quantity. We don't really know about his policies. We don't really know how he feels about Northern Ireland, but we do know that there is a bit of a backlog here in Northern Ireland for him to deal with when he becomes Prime Minister. Now, first of all, and probably most pressing, the devolved government, the Northern Ireland executive here at Stormont, is yet to set a budget, despite the fact that we're nearly 3 months into the financial year. Northern Ireland politicians have said, look, we need more money, but the message from the UK government so far has been, this is your responsibility and you need to sort it out. There's also the issue of legacy, how to deal with Northern Ireland's violent and troubled past. It's been a real thorn in the side for previous Prime Ministers, and Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government introduced a bill through Parliament to try to deal with some of those issues. It will be expected that Andy Burnham will continue with that legislation, so that'll be watched on really carefully. And then, as we've also been hearing from Scotland and Wales, those issues around devolution, his comments about taking power deeper down, we just don't know what that means at the moment. So when we do hear more detail, for sure politicians here at Stormont will be listening very, very carefully indeed.
Sarah, thank you for that. Sarah Gervin there at Stormont, and also to Howell Griffith in Cardiff and Katie Hunter live in Edinburgh at Holyrood. Many thanks. You join us here at Downing Street, where we're expecting in a little bit over 20 minutes now, Sir Keir Starmer, to leave this famous building and go to Buckingham Palace to tender his resignation. We've got a few people coming in now. Chris Mason is with me. Chris?
Yeah, this is the arrival of the departure party, if you like, for Keir Starmer. So what we're going to see in the next couple of hours is an element of choreography around supporters. I'm told there will be some overlap between the supporters of Keir Starmer and the supporters of Andy Burnham, but there'll be some who will only be at one of the two occasions. So what we see here gathering behind us, a collection of supporters of Keir Starmer. They'll be here as the backdrop, if you like, to his moment at the podium, which we expect in the next 20 minutes, half an hour or so, and I guess one or two people for him to greet, to say hello to as he walks down the street to get into his car to head to the palace shortly after that.
Potentially some of these people would have been here just over 2 years ago.
Indeed so.
When he took office.
Indeed so, and I think there's a pointed attempt from Keir Starmer's team to acknowledge that this is a different occasion from arriving. Let's be frank. There's far fewer people here than were here 2 years ago, and there was a very jubilant spirit then. They were all waving union flags and obviously smiles of pride and achievement, and this time clearly for Keir Starmer it's a moment of sadness and rejection.
Sure. I want to bring in Annabelle Tiffin, the BBC's North West political editor.
Next. So we're going to take back. We are going to be discussing just a few moments' time. We will speak to Scotland's Laura Garden, Hal Griffith in Cardiff, and Lindsay Matthews in Northern Ireland very shortly too. We'll talk to them in Wales, Cardiff and Northern Ireland after Sir Keir Stammer's speech. Sir Keir Stammer's going to come out for one more time in about 20 minutes or so time. We're going to take it back to election day. 2 years ago, we're going to take it back to Sir Keir Stammer's first ever speech as UK Prime Minister. For the morning after winning the election, we're going to take it back to 12:30 when he made that first speech as Prime Minister. We're going to take it back to that right now. We're going to take it back.
Keir Stammer there thanking and greeting his supporters, a beaming smile as he shakes hands with those who have supported him for so long. That was just Pat McFadden, who's been the chief of this campaign, shaking his hand. Keir Stammer looking elated. That is an image of the Labour leader we have so rarely seen in public. Hugs, smiles, cheers, and handshakes. As he crosses over the famous street with his wife, Vic, as he often refers to her, making his way across that line of supporters. A hug there from his longtime aide. And such is the desire of his supporters, friends, to greet him as he makes along the line that it's taking him quite a long time to get to the lectern. They're enjoying every moment of this. And here he comes up to the lectern, only the 7th ever Labour Prime Minister.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have just returned from Buckingham Palace, where I accepted an invitation from His Majesty the King to form the next government of this great nation. I want to thank the outgoing Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. His achievement as the first British Asian Prime Minister of our country, the extra effort that will have required, should not be underestimated by anyone. And we pay tribute to that today. And we also recognise the dedication and hard work he brought to his leadership. But now our country has voted decisively for change, for national renewal, and a return of politics to public service. When the gap between the sacrifices made by people and the service they receive from politicians grows this big, it leads to a weariness in the heart of a nation.
a draining away of the hope, the spirit, the belief in a better future, that we need to move forward together. Now, this wound, this lack of trust, can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. But we can make a start today with the simple acknowledgement that public service is a privilege and that your government should treat every single person in this country with respect. If you voted Labour yesterday, we will carry the responsibility of your trust as we rebuild our country. But whether you voted Labour or not, in fact, especially if you did not, I say to you directly, my government will serve you. Politics can be a force for good. We will show that. We've changed the Labour Party, returned it to service, and that is how we will govern. Country first, party second. Yet, if I'm honest, service is merely a precondition of hope, and it is surely clear to everyone that our country needs a bigger reset, a rediscovery of who we are, because no matter how fierce the storms of history, one of the great strengths of this nation has always been our ability to navigate a way to calmer waters. And yet this depends upon politicians, particularly those who stand for stability and moderation, as I do, recognising when we must change course. For too long now, we've turned a blind eye as millions slid into greater insecurity. Nurses, builders, drivers, carers, people doing the right thing, working harder every day, recognised at moments like this before, yet as soon as the cameras stop rolling, their lives are ignored. I want to say very clearly to those people, not this time. Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. The world is now a more volatile place. This will take a while. But have no doubt that the work of change begins immediately. Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community. Our NHS back on its feet facing the future. Secure borders, safer streets, everyone treated with dignity and respect at work. The opportunity of clean British power, cutting your energy bills for good. And brick by brick, we will rebuild the infrastructure of opportunity, the world-class schools and colleges, the affordable homes that I know are the ingredients of hope for working people, the security that working-class families like mine can build their lives around. Because if I asked you now whether you believe that Britain will be better for your children, I know too many of you would say no. And so my government will fight every day until you believe again. From now on, you have a government unburdened by doctrine, guided only by the determination to serve your interest, to defy, quietly, those who have written our country off. You have given us a clear mandate, and we will use it to deliver change, to restore service and respect to politics, end the era of noisy performance, tread more lightly on your lives, and unite our country. 4 nations standing together again, facing down, as we have so often in our past, the challenges of an insecure world, committed to a calm and patient rebuilding. So with respect and humility, I invite you all to join this government of service in the mission of national renewal. Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
That was Keir Stammer's first ever speech outside number 10.
Failure on practical level, that achievements over the last 2 years.
Yes, relative to what he might have hoped for when
That
you and I
was
were
Keir
talking about
Stammer's
that
first
exit
ever
poll, and he
speech
had a majority
when
of
he
north of
won that election 2
150,
years
and
ago back
granted
in
politics is very
2024, but now
volatile,
we are getting
but
ever
you'd have put a
closer.
reasonable amount of money on him having
The
a
media
decent
right
crack at having
behind
a
us.
full
We've got
parliamentary
ITV News, Sky News
term,
also
and we're
here.
not even at the
City
halfway point. The
Railroad,
halfway
Beth
point of this parliament,
Ruby,
if it
some
runs to its
coaches,
full
guys.
5-year length, is
ITV
at
News
Christmas.
have
We're
got
not
their
even at
presenters and
halfway
reporters
point,
here.
and it is coming to an end.
This is
So I
covered on
think where
BBC Radio
he
5
and the
coverage
history
of
books
this too is a
will
day of
reflect
history
where
here.
he can point to some
But
success.
very
Was
shortly,
dragging the Labour
we
Party
will
off the
see Keir Stammer
canvas
come out of that door for
after
one final time
the double
and give his
defeats
final
at
speech
2
as
general
Prime
elections back to
Minister.
back with Jeremy
It's getting
Corbyn as the leader.
ever
They had
closer
all of those
to him coming out for one
problems
more time to
around
Liverpool.
anti-Semitism,
And then
condemned
be
as they
here
were
at
by a watchdog
12:45.
that looked into their record on dealing with
Cosmation,
anti-Semitism.
Nicola
And
Lee.
Keir Starmer regarded that as
Let's go
absolutely
through some
central
words,
to
but I've
his
got Cosmation.
mission in trying to make the
Good
Labour Party
morning.
electable again. And he certainly did that. You know, there was very, very few Labour Party
Well,
leaders who
good
have
morning
won
to you,
general
Keegan. Good morning
elections,
to
and he
everybody.
is
Said,
one
we
of
are
them.
just currently
And
waiting,
yet,
as you can see,
once he had
and
crossed
we
that
can see we're
threshold
waiting
into Downing Street a couple of years ago, remarkably
for
quickly,
Prime Minister
I
Keir
had
Starmer to
senior
come out
folk
and deliver
in the
his
Labour
final message
Party
as Prime
in the
Minister.
government
Once he's done that,
fearful
he will
that in
leave with
their
his
view
wife,
they were
Vic.
squandering the
They'll go in their cab,
opportunity
they'll tunnel
that they
an
had.
hour and a half down
And
to
that
Buckingham
built up
Palace. Will go
slowly, was
as Keir Starmer will
principally
go
whispered
in
in conversations to folk like me
to see
privately
the
for a
King.
very
And to
for a
resign
reasonable
as Prime
amount
Minister,
of
they'll
time,
have a
and then
10-minute
started to bubble up increasingly
chat.
publicly,
Once that's
which is
done,
why
Keir
we
Starmer
could
will
bring
leave.
viewers night after night as we
Everyone
chatted
wants to see Keir
at
Starmer.
10 o'clock. The prospect that Keir Starmer's time might be limited, and here we see the final act, if you like, in that play.
Indeed, do you see him going quietly into the night, sitting on the back benches, or do you think, given how difficult he knows this job is, and he wants Labour to succeed, obviously, that he's going to keep council a little bit better on the back benches?
So I think he said this publicly, that he will offer advice privately when asked, not publicly when not asked. So he isn't someone, I think, by demeanour or instinct, who will be sounding off in public frequently. He says he will remain as an MP for Holborn and St Pancras. That'll be a relief to Andy Burnham, because a by-election there, where the Green Party leader of England and Wales, Zach Polanski, might fancy a tilt, could be quite a lively thing. He hasn't ruled out, though, the prospect Keir Starmer of some sort of international job in the future. You think possibly of NATO or the United Nations or the International Criminal Court. So I do wonder if there may be another act of Keir Starmer in public life beyond this job, but let's see.
Indeed. Annabelle, come back in. Annabelle Tiffin, North West political editor for the BBC. A bit of consternation, it has to be said, among many of the people here behind us and behind the polished black door, that Andy Burnham was looking at some kind of move to take over a year ago. Were you hearing those rumours around about that time?
Yeah, there has been rumours, I would say, probably going back a year.
And he'll do his first speech
I
at
spoke to his
12:45
best
p.m.
friend, his ally, Steve Rotherham, last week, who said, no, it didn't go back that far. We did talk long into the night over a pint about it, but it was really whenever the opportunity would arise, and the opportunity hadn't arisen. And then, as we know, he tried to go to stand in the Gordon and Denton by-election, but was turned down by Labour's NEC, and then he got another opportunity, or there was an opportunity made for him to be able to stand in Makefield when his friend Josh Simons stood down. Now, it is difficult to know exactly when he first started to think about it, but
what Steve said to me was that they have thought about it for quite some time. As I said, they wanted the situation to arise, and it hadn't. When I spoke to Andy Burnham many years ago, he said, goodness me, who would ever want his son to be Prime Minister again? This is in Theresa May days. And I said, well, you did try twice, Andy.
Yeah.
And he said, I know, but I can't imagine wanting to do it now.
So what was the trigger then? If we're going back a year, we're talking about literally 12 months after that huge majority was won by Sir Keir Stammer. What was it that he saw that was going wrong, even at that early stage?
Well, that's it, isn't it? What was it at the early stage? It did seem very early for him to suddenly want to throw his hat into it. But I think he had always had a taste for it. He couldn't quite get over the fact that he'd never become the leader before. So that taste had never ever gone away for him. I think he could hear the grumblings from local MPs in particular.
But in fact, Sir Keir Stammer will be an MP for a local area.
From the party, a few in our area, for not agreeing with things that the government was doing, and also grumblings from the public, from the electorate, knowing that they weren't as happy as they should have been with the Labour governments that they had waited so long for. And if you do go out and box, as you will do as well, and you go into places like Makefield, into Salford, any of those places, they all say we've waited for a Labour government, and now we are disappointed. And I think Andy Burnham picked up on that and thought, right, this is my time now. But he didn't have any seat to stand in, and that was the issue.
Yes, waiting and waiting for change. That change perceived to be not coming. And this sense that perhaps Sir Keir Stammer was not being Labour enough, was somehow carrying on a policy of so-called neoliberalism that perhaps was a little bit too Blairite.
The campaign for it is fit for it, and now for change has
Keeping
happened.
half an eye on the door clamps. I think in the next minute, perhaps less than a minute. In fact, the door is opening right now.
And here we go.
Well, here comes the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Stammer. Let's listen to the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm about to visit His Majesty the King to offer my resignation and close the book on my time as Prime Minister. My work is done. In 6.5 years, I took our party from a historic defeat in 2019, changed it so it was fit to face the country, and won a landslide general election victory in 2024. Since then, it has been the privilege of my life to serve you and this great country as Prime Minister. And I am confident that Britain is now stronger and fairer than it was 2 years ago. Our economy is stronger. Our public services are on the up, with the biggest fall in waiting times for 17 years. Children are being lifted out of poverty every single day. Immigration is down significantly. Our defence and security are on a far stronger footing, and our international reputation is greatly enhanced. Yet the thing I will always take away with me, the most humbling aspect of this job, is the front row seat you get to witness the greatest things of this country in action. To see every day immeasurable acts of resolve, grit, decency, and compassion from people who serve our country, whether that's in their regimental colours, NHS scrubs, or simply the millions of people in their communities who volunteer their time and their effort to the ground beneath their feet. We face a world now where our enemies will stop at nothing to divide us because of our values, our freedom, our decency, and frankly, because of our unflinching resolve towards the brave people of Ukraine. And so under this attack, it is vital that we remember the greatness of the Britain all around us, that while we debate how to fix our problems, there is something we inherit from our country and our character that can give us confidence, that we can change our country for the better, that we can create a Britain where every child can go as far as their talent will take them, and we can unite different people under our common flag if we don't succumb to that division. So, as I now pass the baton to Andy Burnham, I wish him every success. He has my full support. And finally, I want to thank once again my family, Vic and our children, my team, all the staff here and across the Labour Party, everyone at Number 10 and across the civil service, and everyone who has supported our efforts along the way. For all the focus on individuals, politics will always be a team sport, and the changes we've delivered for our country and our party belong to everyone who has fought for them. I thank them again today, and I thank the British people for the opportunity to serve. I go with good grace, I go with a smile, and I go proud of everything that we have achieved. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister with his wife, Vic, thanking all those people who've been behind him during his time here at Number 10. And now he makes his way to the Prime Ministerial car to head to Buckingham Palace to formally hand in his resignation as Prime Minister to the King. And within about an hour of that, Andy Burnham will make that visit too. Let's listen in. So Keir Stammer in that speech saying that he is leaving office with good grace and a smile on his face. He was greeted with applause when he left Downing Street. Left Number 10 to give the speech now. Applause echoes as he leaves and heads towards Buckingham Palace. Off towards Trafalgar Square, passing through Admiralty Arch, and then heading up the Mall and onto Buckingham Palace. Chris Mason is with me. We talked about the fact that he would point to what he has achieved over the last 2 years. But he goes back a little bit further and he talks about where the Labour Party was before he came into office.
Yeah, at first reflection, Clive, as we see his car depart and we see some of his closest staff and aides mingle here, another Prime Minister has gone. Another Prime Minister. And yes, Keir Starmer reflecting on what he sees as achievements in office, but also those reflections on, as he sees it, reviving the Labour Party and bringing it back from its defeats under Jeremy Corbyn. But the extent to which he leans on that as part of his legacy tells you the story of how limited the window has turned out to be for him to achieve in office. Such was the impatience of his party at what they perceived to be a failure to deliver, and deliver sufficiently quickly and brutally, an unpopularity that they concluded was dragging them down. That's the root cause of these scenes that we're seeing behind us now, of Labour and Keir Starmer staff and ministers embracing, the odd tear shed there, and a really big moment for these staff.
All right. The Prime Minister then on his way to Buckingham Palace, where my colleague Fiona is standing by. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Clive. Yes, well, we can see the car actually now just disappearing under the canopy of trees past St James's Park. It's just a very short journey from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace, a matter of a couple of minutes. But obviously for Keir Starmer, this is Well, this is the last time he will visit the King as Prime Minister. The King will be the last person to address Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. We understand he's not going to be coming in through the main gates, but possibly through the north gate. There's all sorts of renovations going on in the palace, so things have changed a little bit. And you can see the crowds there, all gathering. Partly, I have to say, the tourists for the changing of the guard, but lots of people waiting here. There's a real sense of occasion, lots of journalists here. All the people here know something important is happening. And Keir Starmer, as you see, the car there, this convoy, the police fore and aft, now making his way, actually coming up just behind me, coming into the area just in front of the palace, past the Queen Victoria Memorial, statue of Queen Victoria, of course, and as he arrives at Buckingham Palace, we will see his car drive in the gates. We can see it here, the police coming behind me, and there we have, Daniela, there we have the car arriving, and it looks like the car is going in. Is that the north gate or the central gate, Daniela?
The north gate.
It's going the north gate, and there he is.
One of the bizarre, quirky moments of British life. Sir Keir Starmer is arriving here while the military band seems to be playing a Bon Jovi medley on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. So an interesting moment. The music just stopped there. Sir Keir Starmer will now be driven into the central archway of Buckingham Palace, into the main quadrangle, which is where many people perhaps will be familiar when there have been investitures or arriving for garden parties and state events. He will be driven through into the quadrangle there, ready to meet the King with his wife, Lady Victoria. So an important show of constitutional monarchy that we are seeing here, of Keir Starmer arriving to meet the King. We can see the vehicles arriving here. This is the luggage door of Buckingham Palace. Now, this is not the luggage door.
Why is he coming in the luggage
What's
door?
happening here today is because of the work that is being done at Buckingham Palace. Major Ben Rigby there, he is the equerry to the King. Sir Clive Alderton shaking the hand of Sir Keir Starmer there. Sir Clive Alderton is the King's private secretary. He will know Keir Starmer and Lady Victoria very well. Clive Alderton, an absolutely key figure in terms of the relationship between the royal household and 10 Downing Street. So somebody that over the past couple of years Keir Starmer will know well. Into the luggage door, as I was saying, because of the renovation work at Buckingham Palace, they can't actually go in the normal routes that we would see this moment take place. So inside now, Sir Keir Starmer and Lady Victoria, they are going to be taken to the Chinese dining room as well. Again, not the normal audience room we would normally see a Prime Minister and King meet. But again, because of the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace, some of the normal routes and normal rooms are not in use. So things are a little bit different, but there is tradition in what is going to happen over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. So Keir Starmer will meet the King privately. They will
sit there on their two.
They will be two chairs in this room. I mean, it is a new room to us, but we would expect it to be dressed the same way. Two chairs next to one another often. There'll be photographs of the royal family in the room. They will privately chat. There will be a single photograph of this moment issued a little bit later on. Sir Keir Starmer will offer his resignation. The King will accept that resignation, and then will be time for the two men to privately reflect on their relationship, on Sir Keir Starmer's time in office. The King will meet Sir Keir Starmer's family. His wife, Lady Victoria, his two children are here away from the cameras, as they always have been during Keir Starmer's time in office. And that will be it. There will be a goodbye, and that will be the final moment that Keir Starmer leaves here for this phase of his public life. And within minutes, we expect to see the arrival of Andy Burnham.
And for the King and Keir Starmer, there have been key moments in their admittedly brief relationship. I mean, the King knew Keir, someone who was Director of Public Prosecutions, of course, and he'd come across him many times. But nonetheless, there have been key moments in the 2 years they've worked together, not least the visit to the United States, where relationships between America and the United Kingdom looked a bit rocky, and the King went there on an important diplomatic mission to try and smooth things over as much as anything else.
That's right, and of course, nothing that the King does in terms of international travel happens without the Prime Minister and Downing Street wanting it to happen. It is very much a negotiation and a discussion between the royal household, the Foreign Office and Downing Street. So Keir Starmer will have very much wanted the King to go to the United States back in April to try and shore up relationships with the Trump administration, which is what the King tried to do in his own way. So there would have been a lot of discussion. That relationship over the past couple of years between King and Prime Minister will have built. There was an obvious warmth and rapport between them when you saw them together. They meet every week, virtually every week for the entire year, either in person here at Buckingham Palace or over the phone.
And how important is that meeting of the year? Because it happens always, there's the hullabaloo of Prime Minister's questions. I mean, it's a bit of a bear pit in the House of Commons. And then straight after that, the Prime Minister leaves to come here to talk to the King. And suddenly you're in a completely different atmosphere and one of constitutional significance. How useful are those meetings?
I think they're incredibly useful for Prime Ministers. And of course, we don't know, because the whole idea of them is that they are completely private and they are secret and they are a safe space for Prime Minister and King to discuss great matters of state or anything that is concerning them or policy issues, that everyone can speak freely, that it won't be reported in the media. Some past Prime Ministers have perhaps been a little looser-tongued about these moments than others. But what you totally get is a sense that for the Prime Minister, it is a real outlet for them to talk to the late Queen or to the King now, to sound them out, to call on their wisdom and guidance, to get a sense of how they feel about things and what their concerns are as monarchs. So I think it's a very important exchange of ideas and exchange of how they feel about the world, and I think both the King and the Prime Minister will have found that a very, very useful exchange.
And we used to hear, didn't we, that when the Queen was conducting these meetings on the Wednesday, she would signal the end of it by tinkling a little bell. I think it was Tony Blair who mentioned that, and then they knew it was over. I mean, I can't really see King Charles doing that.
I think there's a buzzer. Don't quote me on that. I think there is some kind of buzzer. But we've seen Major Ben Rigby there, who is the King's equerry, a very important figure in the royal household, a sort of personal assistant in some ways, who will know how the King works, who will know roughly how long things are due to last, and perhaps a nod, a look. There'll be an understanding in terms of how long things should last, or when somebody should come in or out of the room. So he will be the person escorting Sir Keir Stammer out of the room today. So he will be the one that sort of has a sense of how long things will last. But we are expecting the meeting between the Prime Minister and King to be around 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less.
And then just looking ahead while the two men are talking inside Buckingham Palace behind us, Andy Burnham will arrive. Now, we don't know exactly when he'll arrive, but when Theresa May resigned to the King and Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, there were just 42 seconds between them, which makes one assume that Boris Johnson was certainly in a car somewhere so that he could then get in pretty quick. And that, in fact, may be the case with Andy Burnham. We don't know. The important thing is that this transition is smooth and that it is quick and nothing interrupts it. And then there's this strange process which is known as the kissing of hands. Just talk us through that, Daniela.
Yes. Just on timings, Fiona, my gut is today that it will be quite quick as well, because the King has a number of engagements this afternoon outside of London. So as soon as so I mean, if you want to get a flavour of the fact that this is just a constitutional monarchy at work, he will do this now. The King see an outgoing Prime Minister and an incoming Prime Minister. He's then off. He's travelling around an hour or so outside of London for engagements for the whole of the afternoon. So I think that the move between Sir Keir Stammer and Andy Burnham will be pretty quick. Yeah, the kissing of hands, there is no kissing of hands.
Presumably there once
was. It's a historical reference, a moment of respect and deference that we just don't do in 2026. So that was where it comes from. But no, this is a handshake and a conversation today to mark the end of one Prime Minister's reign, for want of a better phrase, and the start of another term for a new Prime Minister. So there is no grand moment in this. I think what always strikes me, where you spend so much time here, we both have, at grand state occasions, the royal family on the balcony.
And also the band performing behind us.
But this moment is quiet, it's careful, it's very smooth, and it's, it is private as well, a lot of it. That is about this smooth transition of power off the back of a time that has been quite bumpy politically. Today is something very different. The mood is different. The King has executive power. Today he is passing that executive power on to his new Prime Minister to execute it through his government. It is a very formal, choreographed, constitutional moment that will be very carefully handled.
Yes, it's interesting talking about the constitutional role, because the King, as it is described, can advise and warn. Quite how that warning would be expressed would be interesting to know, wouldn't it? But he can advise and warn, but otherwise that is it. But when it comes to the resignation of a Prime Minister and asking a new Prime Minister to form a government, that's something that only the monarch can do, and it has to be done in person.
Yeah, that's right, which is why the King is here this morning. He wasn't planning to be in London this morning because, as I said, he has these engagements out of London today, and he'd also spent the weekend at Highgrove, his private estate in Gloucestershire.
But yes, he only arrived about 20 minutes
exactly.
ago.
So he has had to come back to London to have this moment because, as you say, it has to be in person. He will be very conscious of wanting this to be right and proper and done correctly. So he is literally doing a very quick stop-off here to see Sir Keir Stammer and to see Sir Andy Burnham, and then he will get on with his regular duties that have been planned for today.
And one wonders, again, to be a fly on the wall, Daniela, but one wonders how much King Charles's personal feelings can come into this. I mean, this is Keir Starmer, a man he's got to know over many years and in many respects has worked closely with.
Yeah, that's right, and you do always wonder how well do they get on, the King and Prime Minister, and do they need to get on? Is that an important part of their relationship?
Well, is it, do you think?
Not necessarily. I don't think they have to get on, but I think the King is somebody who I think would feel that for the stability of his reign, for the success of his reign, he will want to feel that he has a good, strong, challenging, working relationship with his Prime Minister. And I think that has evolved over the past couple of years with Sir Keir Starmer. We have seen them on a number of engagements together. We've seen them at state banquets, on Remembrance Sunday, at a number of official occasions. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer is part of a big project that the King has been doing around knife crime with the actor Idris Elba. Sir Keir Starmer has been very involved in a number of events surrounding that. So they will have got to know each other very well, and it will be important that is it was important that was a successful and strong relationship, which I think it has been. We are now at a stage where there is going to have to be the forging of a new relationship between King and Prime Minister. We're told the King and Andy Burnham do not know each other well. They are familiar with each other. They have both been in public life for some considerable time in different ways, so they are familiar with each other but don't know each other well. So this will be the start of a whole new relationship from the moment they meet here a little bit later.
I'm just looking at the glorious pictures there of Buckingham Palace in the sunshine. I mean, it really looks picture perfect today in this wonderful weather. I mean, this is going to be... This is still a place of enormous constitutional importance, but not somewhere, for the first time, that the monarch is going to live. So how is that going to change its importance in public life, do you think?
Yes, we've learnt in recent weeks that the plan is not for the King and Queen to move back into Buckingham Palace.
And in fact, they've never lived there.
No, they haven't. They have always been at Clarence House, which is smaller, cosier, for want of a better phrase.
It was the former home of the Queen
Exactly, and somewhere that the King and Queen clearly feel much happier, and they are leaving Buckingham Palace to be the official headquarters of monarchy. So it'll be still where we see garden parties. When the refurbishment is finished, it will be where state banquets and state visits are hosted. There is also the possibility of opening up Buckingham Palace now to the public more often for more weeks in the year, because there won't be a King and Queen in residence. So still very much the symbol of monarchy here, but not where the King and Queen will actually live day to day.
And Charles has been king for, 4 years so far. This is his fourth Prime Minister in this time. I mean, this has become a very familiar procedure for him.
Yeah, very much so. He knows what he's doing here in terms of saying goodbye to one Prime Minister and welcoming in another one. I mean, it's an extraordinary number, isn't it, to have seen four in 4 years, and perhaps not what he anticipated after the death of his mother. He would not have thought that it would have played out in this way. But you have to remember as well, he was the longest-serving Prince of Wales. He was incredibly politically engaged. He has a great understanding of state affairs, of the working of government, of figures in Number 10, of the Foreign Office, of ambassadors around the world, of the Commonwealth. He brings to the role a huge wealth of knowledge in terms of the Constitution and of politics and of state affairs. So he's incredibly well equipped to deal, I suppose, with the churn of Prime Ministers here. But even he will have found it quite surprising, I think, that he's had to deal with so many of these moments during his short reign so far.
Well, I'm sure he's not the only one to be surprised. I mean, our politics has changed dramatically in the last few years, and we are all living through it. Because Andy Burnham now is we don't know exactly where he is, but I assume he's not far away, and he will be preparing for his first audience with the King, where the King will ask
he will
him
be
to form a
leaving
government. I
London
was looking up
to
on the
go
royal
on our
website last
anniversary.
night,
Some
and
royal
it's saying there are two
escorts and royal
responses to that
duties
question.
for
I can't imagine anyone has ever said
so
no.
we are
But
imagining,
clearly, if you
I
are the
imagine
leader of
people
the
here
party with the
imagine
biggest
that
majority in the Commons, you
King Charles will be
command the
speaking to
confidence of
Keir
the House of
Stammer for
Commons.
about
That
20
is going
minutes
to be
in
your
length,
role.
and then
I mean, that is
we
quite a
imagine that
moment,
Andy
isn't
Burnham is
it?
on his way
I
down
think in
here
this
right
moment,
now,
historically,
and
if you
then
go back,
we'll
there have
go
been some moments
inside
where
Buckingham Palace
Prime
to
Ministers
meet
have
King
asked
Charles
for
I
if they could just have a pause to check that they can do this. And they can, so,
we
sometimes it's not quite as smooth.
Well, I don't think that's going to be
That's
Andy
not going to
Burnham's
happen
problem
today. I
this
think it's
morning.
going to be very clear that he
and
knows that he is going to be able to
Charles
form a government. He will tell the
risen
King
then.
that.
When
And then I
King Charles
suspect there may be some
when
conversation
Andy
between them
Burnham
about what
King
that
Charles
government
will
will look like
officially
and what
leave
its
London
priorities
and go to his royal duties.
Will be. But it will be really interesting from my job here as senior royal correspondent to see how that relationship between King and Prime Minister evolves. They're not two men who seem on paper very similar. There are other prime ministers that have perhaps felt a little bit more similar to the King in terms of background and school and experience. Andy Burnham and the King have very different life experiences, but I think there is a lot of common ground. We saw Andy Burnham with the King just last year in Manchester visiting Heaton Park Synagogue after the attack there, and you could see there was obviously a lot that they wanted to talk about in terms of multi-faith engagement and communities working together. There is a lot of common ground between the two men, but it will be a relationship that now has to grow and evolve.
Well, certainly Andy Burnham at least has not called for the abolition of the monarchy, as Keir Stammer once did. I think that is a view that he left behind, and certainly his relationship with the King, as you say, seemed very warm.
But
and
Andy Burnham,
I'm struck by the fact that Keir Stammer today, as Prime Ministers have done in the past, would have brought his children along. I mean, the children that we have not seen, they have very deliberately kept their lives private and out of the public eye. But they are coming along as well. So they are marking this as a hugely important moment, obviously in Keir Starmer's life, in the life of the family as well.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder, isn't it, that this is both a constitutional moment but a deeply personal one for Sir Keir Starmer too. We know that he and his wife Lady Victoria have worked incredibly hard to keep their children, their teenage children, out of the public eye, but the royal household will have offered the invitation to come here today for the whole family, for Sir Keir Starmer to have his private moment with the King, but for then his wife and his children to join the King in the Chinese dining room, and for them as a family to have a moment with King Charles. So it is a definite personal outreach on behalf of the royal household, and a very important moment clearly for them as a family, closing the chapter on this phase of Keir Starmer's public life.
And much sooner than Keir Starmer would have anticipated. He went into the palace through the North Gate, as we saw, at 11:25. So one assumes they are now, Keir Starmer, Lady Victoria, in conversations with King Charles. I mean, it's a great moment to say, but it's a very human moment as well. I mean, whatever one's politics are, it's clear that this is something that will have brought enormous sadness to Keir Starmer. That he has been in office, 2 years and just a few weeks. He had great plans. They have not come to pass as he would have wanted them, and he is effectively being booted out. And in fact, when he leaves Buckingham Palace and Andy Burnham arrives, Andy Burnham will arrive in the front, and all the attention will be on him. Will all change immediately to Andy Burnham, the next Prime Minister. And Keir Starmer, what was it? David Cameron once said, "I was the future once." Keir Starmer is out the back door, and as far as we don't know where he's going. I mean, it's over.
It's brutal, isn't it? I mean, it really is. This moment here at Buckingham Palace is a very visual moment of the end of one Prime Minister's term. And it's tough going, I would think, for Sir Keir Starmer and his family. And his day, it's a day of contrast in so many ways. The transition of power itself, overseen by the King, is quiet and smooth compared to the noisiness of Downing Street or the noisiness of the House of Commons. It's a very different mood here today, but on that personal level...